evening. I'd like to call to order the March 14th, 2022 Township Zoning Commission. Our agenda tonight is the rules of procedure. Staff present tonight, Joe Schaefer, Paul Benson. Schaefer, roll please.
Roll call, Mr. Moore.
Present.
Ms. Walsh.
Present.
Mr. Leff.
Here.
Mr. Welch.
Here.
Mr. Welty.
Present.
Commission reviewed the meeting minutes presented by the, or everybody have a chance to read the minutes from the last meeting?
I would make a motion, Mr. Chair, to approve the minutes of the February 14th meeting.
I second the motion.
Great. Mr. Schaefer?
Roll call, Mr. Moore.
Yes.
Ms. Walsh.
Yes.
Mr. Welch. Mr. Welty.
Yes.
Mr. Leff.
Yes. Motion passes. Our business of this evening is the rules of procedure.
Yes, so unfortunately, I do not have the legal review for you because it has not been sent to me. So what you have before you is the draft dated December 1st, 2021, so it's really up to the commission on how you want to proceed, whether or not you want to just continue it again. You could always just adopt it, knowing that if you do get legal advice to change it, we could always change it again later. There's really no public hearing process for really doing it. You can change it as much and how often as you want, depending on what you feel like is necessary. At least that's my understanding of it anyway.
So after the last discussion of the trustee meeting, it raises a question in there that we have the wording that allows us to talk about time restriction and or what we're allowed to do from a audience participation perspective.
Yes.
Do we need to formalize that number in that rules of procedure, or is that strictly our decision if we voice that in the beginning of a script per meeting?
So the board has, for those of you who aren't privy to what the board has decided to do, the trustees have opted to just remove any time limits on public comment. That doesn't mean the zoning commission has to follow suit. You are allowed to, you're your own entity as far as that is concerned, so you make the decision that you feel like is best for the commission. I do know the prosecutor's office happened to be in attendance that night and did briefly speak to the issue. Actually, Prosecutor Schiffel was in the room for a different reason. And she did seemed to recommend that, I guess not recommend, but did mention that sometimes the time limits are helpful because you can make sure you're treating all speakers equally, and that way you don't run into a chance of someone saying that you're just cutting me off because you don't like what I'm saying, or a free speech, like a free speech violation, or you're coming out biased and only letting the people who are speaking on one side of an issue speak, and you're not giving equal time to the opposing side. So that's why we've always, I think, not always, but recently have done the time limits or tried to stick to the time limits, at least during the controversial meetings. So I think it's up to the commission to ultimately debate, but anything I think we can do to make sure we're just treating everyone fairly and equally, I think, is what the prosecutor's office was getting at. And if you don't have a time limit, just be very cognizant of, again, not discriminating or telling people to get down from the podium just because of their point of view or their thing they're saying. So there's risk either way. If you do the time limit, you risk of possibly upsetting people. Now, the prosecutor's office didn't take a position or really opine on how long that time limit should be if you're going to do one. I think we're currently at 3 minutes, or generally that's what the board had been doing.
But we don't need to specify it within the rules of procedure. We can specify it per hearing, or do we need to be that specific?
I think if we're gonna do a time limit, I think it's best we specify it in the rules of procedure that that's what you're going to do.
Okay.
Hey, Joe, before you finish that.
Yes, sir.
May just, for context, before we get into the meat of this, what was the reasoning, if indeed you know it? I was not available to look at the tape or anything, but what was the reasoning for the trustees to determine in and of themselves they would not want would not want time limits on public comments?
I think they just felt like they wanted to make sure the public had adequate time to speak. I think they thought 3 minutes was too short.
Okay.
And they just wanted to go back. They hadn't always done a time limit. It was something the prior iteration of the board, or maybe 2 iterations ago, had instituted during some of the more controversial hearings, and then it sort of stuck around.
Okay.
But I think there's just, the current board feels just, I think, differently in terms of that respective issue.
Okay.
So I'm just trying to look in here to see if we spelled out specifically a time limit. I thought we
I did
mentioned
not.
something in the little preamble we had drafted.
I did not see, I read it again today, I did not remember seeing anything come up.
I
It said we
think,
may put a time in.
I know, like I said, I know we drafted that preamble. Now, of course, I can't.
Unless I'm looking at the wrong version, that's all.
Okay.
Mr. Chair,
We didn't put a specific time in there. We just sort of reserved the right to do it.
Right.
I do think we ought to be consistent in however we do it.
That is my fear. We either have to do it or not do it at all. I don't think we can pick and choose holy cow, this is gonna be a hot topic and we're gonna limit. No, it's either gotta be, in my opinion, it's either gotta be in the rules of procedure or we're not gonna do it, period. And
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. I've seen the trustees at some meetings, they don't have a time limit. Some meetings, they did have a time limit. And it was kind of frustrating because somebody arbitrarily decided that
Yeah.
tonight we need to do that. So personally, I'd be in favor of having time limits with a minimum or a preferred time of 3 minutes, because that seems to work, with a maximum allowance of 5, should whatever reason the commission decides, tonight we're going to let you talk for 5 minutes. There may be a reason for that. If you only have 2 people in the audience, go for 5 minutes. If you have 30 people, keep it at 3. 3 would be the standard, 5 would be the exception.
I would speak in favor, if we do these time limits, that, one, it allows all the constituents in Genoa Township to have an idea before they go to the meeting, how long their prepared speech may be, so that it's not, you write a 3-minute speech and you could have 8, or you unfortunately wrote an 8-minute speech and that day we decided 3. So, I think it would be best if we had it published and everyone know. Number 2 is, I think that I do not like the idea of being vague, and some meetings may not have it, but if we think it's a hot topic, we do, because that almost works in the face of the citizens, because if we don't think you're a hot topic, you can talk longer, but if we think you're a hot topic, then we look like we want to cut it off. I don't think that doesn't look like very transparent, even though I know the idea is to get out of a meeting before midnight. And then the third thing is, I don't think it should be on us as board members to arbitrarily deciding that day what the allowance should be based on topic, because, different hearings in the same night, some are contentious and some are not. And I think that for fairness of all, either you absolutely have none or you publish what you have. Thank you.
I would add one thing, that if we choose not to have time limits, then we need to choose to set a standard duration of the meeting. And I've been involved in public forums on both sides, where if you have time limits and you have a lot of speakers, then right up front, you're going to say, we're not going to get through the agenda today with the number of speakers. But I think this flip side to this is, if we just let folks be arbitrary in terms of what they speak, then we need to probably have a time limit that says our zoning commission meetings will run from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I don't think either one is a real great piece of work, but I think I defer to the standard time limit in whatever we decide it might be, because I think it's clean. And people, to your point, Sarah, they know, hey, this is what you're being allotted. And if you can't get through your content in 3 minutes, then you can certainly ask the board to have a continuance, and maybe, we have time for them to do that.
Or bring a friend and have them speak 3.
Even better.
Or sometimes what we've done is we let them speak 3 and we cycle through everyone, and then if we still feel like there's time, we'll let people come back
We
up
did
for.
kind of the last time, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
on
it
the-
should, but it
it's-
should be consistent. Every meeting should have a time limit. It shouldn't be, well, tonight we're going to announce we have it. It should be every meeting, this is the time limit. And I know we're not talking about this, but the other thing I would probably want to think about is for the people presenting, the developers, architect, give them a time limit. I mean, every sales presentation I ever did to, 15 college people sitting there, you had an hour, period, boom, and they'd cut you off. And if you couldn't get your point across in an hour, 45 minutes, whatever they gave you, that was your problem.
7 minutes, Ray.
That I'd probably want to run by the prosecutor's office. I just don't know what kind of legal rights an applicant has in terms of making their case.
So
It's a great idea, though.
Let 'em
I don't know what
challenge.
page this is, but item 3, do you have the printout? Because all I have is the electronic.
Yeah, I have.
So that it says regarding public comment, in addition to the authority already mentioned, the acting chairperson may, 1, 2, and number 3, is establish a time limit. And that's where I was getting at. It seemed vague, other than saying we can say less than 2 minutes is what it says in here.
Yeah, I mean, we can always strengthen that. If you want a predictable time limit, we can put that in there.
All right. So.
I'd propose
I
5
like
minutes.
I like 5. You like 5?
I've been in public forums where you only get 3 minutes to speak, and
3's tough.
I could run my
we've
jib
put-
for a
we've
long
put-
time. I get paid to run my jib, and so, I mean, 3 short, I don't think,
If I may add too, I mean, I think our role is really more technical, whereas sometimes the public comments with the trustees might be more, not just technical, but
policy.
emotional
Yeah.
for individuals wanting to state their thoughts. Where we're just saying, we're comparing your statement to our standards and practices that are already,
Good point.
written.
Very good point.
So what I can do is I can take this back and maybe revise, I think it was item 3 on page 13, and then maybe the statement of policy that we had drafted. It sounds like we're leaning towards a 5-minute, and maybe just revise that a little bit, since it sounds like we want to make a change there. The tricky thing with public comment, and I'm sure you've all seen it, is sometimes it not devolves, that's not the right word. Sometimes it becomes more of a Q&A session, especially when you get people who have not used to zoning and are just trying to learn about things. And unfortunately, for the sake of efficiency of the meetings, that's not what always, I mean, it can be helpful because there's others in the room who are very interested in that information and are learning as well, but it can be hard to not be doing zoning 101 with every application. And I think sometimes it's tough to find that balance of educating the public, but at the same time, we can't be rehashing the same subjects at every meeting just because there's someone sitting in a room who's never been at a zoning meeting before.
So.
Or you're going to
is
need
there-
a sign for the podium that says public comment limited to 5 minutes.
I mean, and this document would help, because then we have a rules of procedure already, but, this would be a public document, we'd post it on the website, we'd have copies and say, if you want to know about how the meeting's going to run and what the zoning commission's all about, here's the document of their playbook. This is how they do business. And then, we try to advertise as much as we can, that questions can be directed to my office before your hearings, to at least get some of those procedural questions answered, but not everyone always takes us up on it.
Although we don't have a final opinion from the prosecutor's office, if we decided to adopt this, it doesn't preclude us from changing something in the future, whether it be we electively decide to change it or we change it under the advice of counsel. So with that minor change, it may behoove us to move forward with it. And then, it
force the other
gives
change.
everyone, right, it gives everybody the idea of how, what our rules are. I mean,
You are going to have, currently you have 3 applications on your agenda next month. One of them's substantial.
Good.
I mean, I can tell you what they are, it's public.
Yeah,
record.
so
if you want.
from rules of procedure of the normal What do we follow?
Robert's Rules of Order.
Okay. When there is question and answer during a presentation, do you stop time? Is it that time, once you're at the podium, you get 5 minutes? I mean, what are the guidelines there when there is back and forth?
Generally, as I know it, public comment is supposed to essentially be a one-way conversation. They get up to 5 minutes to tell you whatever they want as long as it's on topic. And then really what the commission is just supposed to do is, you take your notes, mentally written, however you do it, and at the end of public comment, then you start questioning me or the applicant, or then I guess you could call up the public if you want to talk to them directly, you could do that. But I mean, ideally, I know that's often not how it goes in those meetings, but ideally, that's what a public comment period. It's public comment. It's not a public Q&A session. It's comment. Now, if their comment is a question, they're free to ask the questions, and then the commission is free during your discussion period to decide whether or not you want to address those questions or you're not going to address those questions. It's your meeting.
David, to your, I mean, I think Chip, you know too, I mean, like, in the banking commission, which I was a part of when I worked in state government, you run the show. If you want to ask a question within the public comment period, you're available to do that. There usually is a secretary that has a clock that time counts it. If I want to ask a question, I have to ask you if I can ask the question. And then they get the extra time if you want to just go right down to, if you go to the General Assembly, which Chip, I know you've been down there, there's a time counter, there's somebody that state pays to do that. And then they give them their time.
We've tried to, when we have been counting time at some of these meetings, I have tried to be generous, and if the board starts engaging with the resident, I've tried to not penalize them for that. But it can become real, because some of those conversations drag on rather long. So I think the cleanest way, and I'm not against answering people's questions, I don't want people to think that. I just think the cleanest way to do it is for everyone to get them out there, and then for someone to be writing a list, and including me, if there's stuff I feel like I can address, and then trying to go through them, all the topics that got brought up during the public comment. Because a lot of the questions and comments are also repetitive. So then you can go through and ask every question or address every topic that you feel like is valid discussing. You may not feel everything that gets brought up during public comment is valid. I mean,
They could always.
It's your decision.
A resident could always pose their question during their public comment, 5 minutes, and we come back and answer it, or the applicant or Joe answer it after their 5 minutes is done. I mean,
correct, you could do that too, before the next speaker. Okay, we're gonna address this question before we move on, so that way everyone in the room has the answer.
I like that. Better than back and forth.
Yeah,
You're not
instead of
waiting to the end,
engaging.
so, and if it's a misconception, you fix it right then versus have 5 more people talk about a
And you
Correct.
have I think as chairman, you have the ability to say, based on the process we're in terms of your presentation, we'll grant you 2 more minutes to finish your comments. And that's legitimate because that also gives anyone else the ability to make a compelling case, and you, as the chairman, are able to present that with that authority.
Yeah, I mean, I can tell you, when we got into some of those really controversial meetings, it was a lot more efficient when people were getting up, they were getting their time, saying their comments, and we were able to roll through a lot of public comment relatively quickly because we weren't getting drawn out into the conversations. And then when the board was able to discuss, they were able to go boom, boom, boom down the list of the stuff that they had heard during the comment and address each one. And then people still feel like they're being heard and getting their questions answered. It may not be right away, but it just makes things more organized.
I know we've not had a lot of volume the last 12 months, but I have found in the ones that have come, I think some of the basic questions with the rewrite, with the application being on, with all the things that have done, I think with you and your staff in interacting with them, not more, more abundantly, but maybe that's the case. The basic questions, I don't see that we get a great deal of them. Maybe J.C. Manning had a few, but that was, I think, more confusion of what they were told and what, they wanted to do.
Yep.
That's where I think your role becomes important on those basic questions and to get them
And we're always happy to answer.
prepared to come here.
We're always happy to answer those questions in advance, because sometimes we can cut off like someone's misunderstanding. They go, oh, I'm glad I talked to you because I wasn't getting this right. Not that we don't want them to come to the meeting, but if they're gonna come to the meeting, at least they can come and make sure they've got the right understanding of things.
We can always, continue a hearing to another day. If there's that much, and we don't get through it, and it's,
That's always an option too, yeah. You could
11
always
o'clock at
schedule
night.
special meetings to
yeah.
handle business if you got like an overflow. Now, I do think if you've got applications all on an agenda, I think ideally you need to open each one of those hearings, because that's when it was advertised for, and that's what the public's gonna expect. Now, whether you finish it or how far you get into it is a different story, but at least you've opened it, and for the legal record, you can say, okay, we opened the hearing within our allotted legal time frame, especially in rezonings. But yeah, sometimes things just have to get continued.
All right, so we're gonna put 5 minutes in there.
So if we're talking about adopting something tonight, we would need to hash out the verbiage. Because I guess you could just grant me the authority to just write something up and hope that you're comfortable with it, but I'd strongly
It'd have
prefer,
to be legally reviewed anyways, correct?
yeah, I'd probably send the prosecutor's office an updated copy of it anyway.
I think it's something along the lines of each individual is limited to 5 minutes of comment during the public comment period. And I say individual so that, there's not, well, my wife and I showed up and everybody gets 5 minutes. It doesn't matter who you are.
And also with the public comment, not every hearing technically under law requires it. Like a lot of the administrative hearings we have with like the final development plans, since it's not a rezoning, I'm not 100% sure you actually even need to have we treat them like everything like a public hearing because we like to advertise and give the public a chance to come out and speak, but when you're handling an administrative matter, I'm not sure there's actually a requirement to hold a public hearing like you would on a legislative rezoning act or a zoning text amendment. Because you're really just applying the law at that point. There's really not a lot of the debating that happens when you're doing a legislative act of should we or should we not change the law.
Right.
You're executing law at that point or administering it as opposed to revising it or changing it. Yeah.
It's late in the day for a word like that. I haven't even been home yet.
That's why, like, read the public comment section, we sort of speak to that not every meeting necessarily is going to have a public comment period in it. We don't have to offer it for every single thing we discuss.
I'd recommend, Mr. Chairman, we put the 5 minutes in and let our able-bodied leader define the language and present it to us at a later date.
Yeah, I'm comfortable doing that.
You're looking for a motion?
If you're just instructing me to revise some of the language and send you out a new draft, I don't need a motion for that.
Would you like a motion to approve the rules?
Unless we want to approve it with the stipulation, right?
Do that.
Is that
Well, if you're going to approve something, I'd probably try to approve what's currently written, and then if you want to amend them, we'd have to amend them later. Or, in the alternative, we hash out what exactly you want it to say right now, and you adopt it with that modification.
Since you don't have a legal review yet, we might be changing it later.
Correct.
Anyway.
Correct.
To switch topics for a second, though, within that, did we include, or I know I had brought up the issue about mandatory recusal versus, I think it was suggested recusal in there.
I looked into it. I don't think there's anything that grants the commission the authority to mandate that. I mean, you could put it in there, but I just don't think you're going to be able to actually administer or execute it.
Let me ask a question to your point, because I know I've been through this before where I've felt that there might be a conflict of interest, and so I came to Joe, and Joe said, Chuck, that's a good point, I don't know, I'll talk to the prosecutor. Then the prosecutor called me directly and said, that's a good point, Chuck, I don't know. And he said, but if I'm you, I would just, being completely clean, just recuse yourself from these decisions, and there's no question. And so maybe that's a way of, I don't, maybe it's you need to self-disclose, and then if there's a question, it needs to go to a higher authority, Chip, maybe the prosecutor.
Ultimately, it goes to the Ohio Ethics Commission. They're the ones who will make the final determination, not even the prosecutor's office. The prosecutor's office will give you their thoughts. They tend to be pretty conservative. And
Right.
typically, when I've asked those questions before, it's always like, if you think there's even a remote chance of an optic, even if it's just an optics issue, just remove the question and just play it safe.
Let me take that one step further and correct me if I'm wrong, Chip. So what if it is not the individual? It's maybe a member of the commission that says, I don't know if you should be involved or voting on this case because you're involved from a business perspective. How do we play that?
I mean, you can always free to publicly confront the member in the meeting and raise the issue, but ultimately, it's each individual's member's responsibility to comply with Ohio's ethics
That's a
standards.
good answer to my question.
So if if another board member thinks there's a problem, that member doesn't take action, there's always the avenues for reporting it. It's a difficult situation, though, because like I understand, if you feel like they're jeopardizing the vote of the commission or the hearing in general, I can understand why the commission would not want someone to do that, but I just don't think, from my discussions and research into the matter, that there's just nothing that grants the zoning commission the authority to, I mean, not even the trustees have that authority. They can't censure or remove
No, I
a
think
member.
you answered it cleanly. I think it was a good answer.
Chairman, I move that we accept the rules of procedure with the 5 minutes added, giving our staff the directive to write the 5 minutes for public comment per individual, per hearing, into our rules of procedure.
Is that sufficient for you?
I guess just for clarification, when you say accept, do you mean adopt?
Adopt, sorry. Yes, adopt, sorry.
I will second that motion.
Discussion?
Further discussion?
Do you feel comfortable with that?
I can do it. I'll try to make sure I keep any revisions to the bare minimum necessary to not be making any substantive changes. And then obviously, if you don't like what I did, we can just change it again.
Perfect. Okay. Roll call.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Ms. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Welty? Mr. Leff?
Yes.
I will try to have that revision to you by the end of the week.
Okay.
And I'll just make the change, and I guess post it to the website as the official adopted rules of procedure for the zoning commission. I'll let the prosecutor's office know that we've got a new document, and if they have any further concerns with the final revision, they'll let me know.
We are open to public comment. Having none? Question about our next meeting.
Yeah, so
The 11th.
the 11th, yes, you're going to be busy on the 11th.
I am out of town.
Oh,
Is anybody else would be missing on the 11th? We need
Mr. Welty will be.
I won't be here. Who will be the deputy vice chairman? Who will be the deputy vice?
Well, that's an interesting question, because generally you reorganize at your April meeting too, so. And you're currently down a chair and your vice chair. So I guess now we could defer to our rules of procedure as to how we would handle this situation.
Yes.
So actually, I think I did anticipate what would happen if we get down both.
It is in there.
Let's see what we said. I just gotta find it.
The most senior non-officer member of the commission shall assume the role.
That sounds correct. So I would need to go back and see who the most senior member is.
It is, it's one of these two.
Charlie and I were appointed at the same time.
I think it's you.
Yeah, but date of rank, Chip, you were there before me by 2 minutes.
We could do tallest. I'm just-
So I've
do
done that before.
tallest.
No, date of rank.
We did defer to the most senior member
Yeah.
on the group.
It's our illustrious colleague to my right.
I'll verify that, but yeah.
I thought it was by height.
I'm pretty sure.
The oldest member of the board.
I was going to clarify, it was the senior, not the oldest. You don't want to
So
go
with
there.
that, well, we have 5 then.
Yeah, so where we stand is, in case you probably all saw my emails about the appointments. We did have Mr. Antonette's vacant position was filled by Mr. Carter, Mr. Jim Carter. He actually, I told him he could start serving this evening because Mr. Antonette's term had already started. So my interpretation was the board didn't set a starting date, hence his term would have began immediately. But he was out of town, so he couldn't come this evening. And then the other new member who will take Mr. Welty's spot is a gentleman by the name of Kurt Sears. So he's not been on BZA or zoning commission before, so he's going to be new, but there's nothing wrong with that. We like seeing some new faces and getting new people in the game. So he'll start at the April 11th meeting. Depending on how many people we have here, it might be interesting. If we lose another member, he might be sitting as a voting member his very first meeting, so we'll have to see. So as far as applications go, you have Mirasol, which was continued. Their revisions aren't due until a week from today, so I haven't seen anything from them yet. You have Gia Marcos has a should be not too long, final development plan amendment application submitted. Long story short, I administratively approved them to build a small permanent stage back there on the patio, but in the course of doing the research for it, I found in their 2009 approval, it says they are prohibited, they agreed to never do live outdoor music out there, which is, I think they've had live outdoor music is a lot out there. So when I approved the permit for the stage, I said, just so you know, I can only approve the stage, but I still have to hold you to your 2009 development plan tax. It said you're not going to do live outdoor music. So they are coming through and going to ask that that be just stricken out from the text.
I will have to recuse myself because I have listened to their live outdoor music as a complete and full violation of our zoning commission bylaws.
Yeah, sorry, that doesn't get to recuse
I don't
you.
think that gets you.
That doesn't
recused.
count. Sorry.
And then, so those are the two, should be relatively quick ones, I would think. And then the big one you'll have on your agenda is the courtyards at Big Walnut, submitted by EPCON for the property commonly known as the Velardo tract, which is the large tract of property that's north and west of the police station off of Big Walnut Road. Between sort of Walnut Grove Estate, north side of Big Walnut Road, between Walnut Grove Estates and sort of the police station. And it goes, you don't see most of it because it runs along 3 behind the tree line. And, it's more north to south than it is.
Additional phase.
No, this is a brand new, this would be a brand new development.
plug-in.
So you actually have the materials. I think Mr. Benson prepped them for you, and he's got them in your box. We actually received them last week, but we were waiting to see what else we got. Today was the deadline for development plans, so we were trying to give it to you, everything at once.
And Mirasol is the.
Mirasol is the one where they want to get rid of the playground and the walking path.
Gotcha.
So Mirasol would be first as old business, and then I'll have to discuss with the chair or whoever's going to be the acting chair of what order you want to,
Come see you.
what order you want the other two in.
Perfect.
Whether you want them in the order they got applied for, or do what we did at the last meeting and try to save the bigger ones for last.
In terms of that, and Chip, you say you're not here as well? Or
No,
not?
I'm here.
But David, you're not. Are we able to maybe briefly discuss Mirasol tonight?
Can't do it without the applicant here.
Okay, all right. That's what I thought. Okay.
But those are the applications. Today was the deadline for anything else new. We didn't get anything, so we're sitting at 3 right now.
Any others in the pipeline?
There's one I've heard rumors about, but I don't know when or if you're gonna see it.
Okay.
Actually, there's 2 that I know of that are out there working their way through due diligence. One's residential, one's non-residential. Just switching gears here, even though it's not something that'll come in front of you, we did have a sketch plan submitted for subdivision of property off of Hughes Road. Just in case you get any questions. the back half of the property that's known as the Audino property. The front half of the property is a house that fronts onto Big Walnut Road and is a rather large tract, and then the back half is 26 acres with access to Hughes. So it's not a rezone, it's not a development plan, wouldn't be something that would come in front of this group. Be a conventional subdivision that would just run through the standard county review process that I'm a part of. But just in case you get any questions about it, it is posted on the regional planning's website under the sketch plan section, or you can direct the questions to my office and we'll take care of
They
them.
were public comment people, I think, at the last one, right?
What's that?
I think the owners were public comment individuals that are,
No, they aren't owners, they're my neighbors.
okay, got it.
It was neighbors of the property, but not the owners of this.
Is that RR now? Or
Yes, it's a rural residential. So what the sketch plan is for 2-acre lots on a street system with a couple of cul-de-sacs.
It's a lot of land.
Mm-hmm.
And then nothing for the site walk?
We don't have anything for the site walk. Was today, Paul, the install, was today the deadline?
21st, it says on the.
Oh, next week. So we'll see. It'll be interesting to see if we get any more of those requests. Now that they're optional, I'm not sure how many more we'll see. It depends.
All right, anything else?
I don't believe I have anything else for you this evening. I'm trying to think. If there's anything else I needed to apprise you of, but I don't believe there is.
Okay.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Good. Meeting is done, 7:30.